Good afternoon. I'm so sad to find out that we are following a wonderful panel on what dogs do to give you joy. I have 3 dogs, so I'm obviously a believer, so I would have loved to have been there. But we have another source of joy to talk about, and that is civic engagement, contributing to our democracy, often in the form of sort of everyday giving, everyday volunteering, the various ways that each of us can contribute. I'm going to start. My name's Jane Wales. I direct a program at the Aspen Institute basically on how social change happens. It's called Philanthropy and Social Innovation, but it is sort of broader than the title. And I'm going to first introduce the panelists and then provide a bit of an overview, a context for the conversation. So, I think you know David Brooks from his columns in the New York Times. I don't know if you line up with me at the city market at 6 a.m. to get the Times. And from his weekly appearances on there's Friday afternoon appearances on the NewsHour. And also for his 5 books. I'm always astounded by people who can have that level of discipline, and they're all equally wonderful. So next to David is Xavier Jennings. Xavier was an opportunity youth, and that was a phrase coined by the Obama administration to refer to young people who were out of work and out of school. And Xavier is one of those people who's taken charge of his life, but not only given meaning to his own life, but contributed to community in remarkable ways. He, in his late teens, he joined something called the Youth Build America program at High Mile Youth Corps. He now runs that program that he joined back then, but when he joined it, what he gained from it most immediately were all the tools of self-sufficiency, as well as a GED degree. So he gained a lot from that, and we'll be asking him about another thing he's done, which is he's founded something called the Gang of Books. He also coaches Little League. He also mentors middle school students through the Boys Club. So we don't have time for all the wonderful things that Xavier does with his life and for our community as a whole. Yeah, superstar. So Hannah is next, and Hannah Corona is the first-generation Chicana. She's born and raised in East Los Angeles. She serves on the leadership team of an organization called Democracy, SHE. It provides online training to teenage girls to foster their civic engagement. And she herself, as an alum of something called Civics Unplugged, received training herself. There are several issues that move her, that are important to her, and we'll get a chance to have you talk to her, and us, David and I, to talk to her as well about that. And then right next to me is Kamar. Kamar Sati was born in Damascus, Syria. She founded the Muslim Student Association while in high school. I mean, what is striking about all of these, well, not David and not me, but the rest were so engaged at that age. I suspect, actually, David, I suspect you were too. Yeah. Well, you've made up for it. She founded the Muslim Student Association in her high school. She facilitated interfaith conversations, something that she is still very passionate about, and she works to forge connections among those with very different backgrounds and life experiences and faiths and identities. And she will, I think the thing to say about her is that while she really values tradition, and sees the importance of tradition to each of our identities, she also is engaged in advancing the social good, social change, when change is called for. So she's very much kind of it's the essence of what pluralism is about, where you can freely practice your own traditions, proudly practice your own traditions, while being part of a larger society, a larger democracy. A thing to warn you about is she's an artist, so she's got all these talents you don't know. But the important thing is that in her spare time, she pranks her brother. So I noticed he wasn't cheering here. So, okay. I'll just give you a little bit of background and do it from the perspective of something called the Generosity Commission, which I have the pleasure of co-chairing. The commission started, and I co-chair with a man named Mike Giannone, who's the CEO of Blackbaud, which provides a lot of the digital infrastructure of giving and volunteering. We started with the proposition that civil society is our democracy's singular asset. Can think of no other country that has as robust a civil society, and it's what the organizations, the associations, the networks that comprise civil society are often where democratic decision-making is practiced. It's where we learn how to self-govern. It provides the spaces for that, the spaces for solving problems together, for stewarding community resources together, for taking choices together, and forging both metaphorical and actual bucket brigades. Civil society, these organizations are powered by engaged citizens, by everyday volunteers, everyday civic leaders, everyday givers who make that kind of commitment. And from that commitment, gain, well, I'm going to ask David to talk more about this, gain not only a sense of connectedness and purpose, but even joy. But most importantly, our society benefits hugely from them. Yet, their numbers have fallen and continue to fall. Year over year, according to Giving USA, which does an annual analysis of the trends in giving and volunteering, year over year, more volunteer hours are donated, but by fewer volunteers. And year over year, more dollars are donated, again, by fewer givers. And so the question there is, to some extent, that's obviously a reflection of a shrinking middle class. That's a reflection of middle class precarity. But there's more to it. It's not just about money. And it certainly doesn't fully explain the volunteer data. Because these trends happen right alongside two other trends that you're acutely aware of. And that's the rise in social isolation and the decline in societal trust. And so we'll be able to talk more about what we've learned and about the positive, we're going to go beyond analysis to solutions. But just say that the people on this panel, I'm just really proud and delighted to be with them because they're the counterexample. They're the examples of engaged citizens, folks who make a real difference. So David, I'm actually going to start with you just because I missed your wonderful panel on happiness. So I would like you to, I've got all kinds of data on what giving does to and volunteering does to advance democracy, but I want to know what it does for us.
Yeah. I would say, Jane, that was a classic Aspen moment. I missed your wonderful panel. How do you know it was wonderful if you missed it? Yeah, I mean, I wrote 20 million columns in 2015 with the theme, "Don't worry, Donald Trump will never be the Republican nominee for president." So I got that completely wrong. I was living in DC, my social life was in New York, I was teaching at Yale. How could I be out of touch with America? And so I founded something called Weave, the Social Fabric Project, and we traveled around just to be in touch with people like you folks. And while the rest of America, or parts of America, were really miserable, I had the greatest 3 years of my life, because I was around people, and later I want to ask you folks, there's a moment of responsibility where people decide, I'm not just going to be the person who walks by, I'm going to assume responsibility. And then there's the second, I'm going to choose this, not that. And how do you answer your moments of obligation? But so the people I was around were the most joyous people on earth. They had lived their lives of pure selfless service. There was a woman in Chicago named Aisha Butler who lives in a neighborhood called Englewood, which is a challenging neighborhood in Chicago. She decided to move out because it was dangerous. And when she's going to move out, she looks across the street and sees a little girl playing in an empty lot with broken bottles. And she goes to her husband and says, we're not moving. We're not going to be another family who did this, who left this. And so she Googled volunteer in Englewood, and she did some random volunteering, and now she runs Rage, the big community organization in Englewood. And if you go to Englewood, they have T-shirts in the stores, proud son of Englewood, proud daughter of Englewood. They're really building community. We ran into a lady in Florida, who was helping elementary school kids cross the street. We asked her, do you have time to volunteer in your neighborhood? And she said, no, I have no time. And we said, are you getting paid for this? And she said, no, I just help the kids across the street. And then we said, well, what are you doing for the rest of the day? And she said, well, on Thursdays, I take food to the hospital so they'll have some nice food to eat. And we said, do you have time to volunteer? And she said, no, I have no time. And she didn't see that as volunteering. It was just what a neighbor does.
Yeah.
And so I've image in my head of just joyful human beings in what were hard times. The last story I'll tell is of Stephanie Ruzek, who there was a Latino neighborhood in middle of Houston which had no after-school programs. So she starts an after-school program which within a couple years has 1,500 kids going after school. And I remember her sitting on the ground with a bunch of kids doing tongue twisters, unique New York. I can't say it, but if you try to say that really fast. And we brought her to DC for a minute, and things got really tense, political differences, social tensions. And she said, let's play rock, paper, scissors. And we got 400 people playing rock, paper, scissors. Because she's just a joyous person. She knows how to produce joy. And so I can give you stats, but the people who are engaged in their community and are just wonderfully relational are happy people.
Yeah. Xavier, say a word about your moment of responsibility.
Yeah, so can you say that question again?
Your moment of responsibility when you were a teen.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you all hear me? Yeah. All right, so my name is Xavier Jennings, and do I need a mic? Sounds like I need a mic. All right. So my name is Xavier Jennings, and I know we got a lot to cover in a little amount of time, and the further I get in my career, I have notes here. So I want to make sure I stay on track, okay? So my journey began when I was 18 years old, and really having a sense, like a lost purpose. So I didn't graduate high school, and I was, back in 2008, there was a recession, so it was hard getting a job. And the reason why I didn't graduate high school was not because I wasn't capable, it's because I went to 6 different high schools because I moved around so much. So when I enrolled myself into what would have been my senior year, just turned 18, I had a chance to select my own classes. So you can imagine I picked gym, I picked art, I picked ceramics, and I was wondering why all of my classmates in those classes were freshmen. And then I came to the realization that it was a month before graduation, and my name was not on the list because I wasn't eligible to do the requirements. So my discouragement and dissentment was really like I lost hope in the system in terms of what that looks like. So when I turned 18, I was able to find a program called Youth Build where I was able to engage in education, and there's a service component to it where I was able to learn the trade of construction, building affordable housing. And for me, it was, that moment for me was just like I wanted to get in there and be selfish and get my education, not realizing the community, just like what David mentioned, the community that I grew up in, community service was more talked to from a deficit standpoint. So if you did community service or service to the community, it was what did you do? So you got in trouble when you had that versus it was praised in, suburban America with like, oh, look what you're doing. You're giving back to the community. So for me, I just really wanted to get in there and get my education. But what I found was much more. So I learned essential life skills, but what I found was a sense of purpose and agency for myself. And now, 15 years later, I know it doesn't look like it, but 15 years later, now being able to be the director of that program, I now have the fortunate experience to see other young people have those transformative experiences and then give back to their community in various ways. Yeah.
Hannah, same question.
Yeah. Can you repeat the question?
The question is, what was your moment of responsibility that David referred to? That sort of moment when it turns on and says, hey, I can make a difference. I want to make a difference, and I can.
Your mic works.
Yeah. Y'all can hear me? Everyone can hear me? Perfect. Yeah, I think that's honestly a difficult question to ask because, quite frankly, I think my whole life there's always been components in where I've realized that, oh my gosh, I need a help. So I think a good place to start is, so my parents are Mexican immigrants, and when they came to this country, they didn't have much to choose from. So they chose to work They're street vendors. So I think when I saw the work insecurity and I saw just so many aspects of the lack of financial literacy and the lack of guidance, I realized how important it was to take action in that regard. So I think from a young age, you could say that I've always known about the importance of actually being civically engaged and helping my community in any ways that I can, not only my home and my family, but the people in my community, which are day laborers, sons and daughters of immigrants, and just so much more. But I think closer into high school, I came across what we've already talked about a little bit, Democracy. So Democracy is a national nonpartisan organization that focuses on reaching women from all over the country and work on evidence-based resiliency skills to develop their confidence in one day running for office. And one day, the founder, Sarah, came to my high school, and she pitched Democracy as this opportunity to meet a bunch of friends. It's meet a bunch of young women who filled with radical love and just filled with excitement to learn. She didn't even pitch it as something, this is gonna be politics related and you're gonna grow this much. It was more so, hey, come and have fun, come and meet some friends. And I think when I went and I actually sat in on a session, I realized how much I didn't know and how much there was still needed to learn. And I think that's when I identified that women empowerment in politics is another issue that I was heavily focused on and needed to address specifically and work towards helping other people in.
Great, thank you. And Kamal,
Same question.
same question.
I think my moment of realization came to me in multiple phases. Obviously, I started the Muslim Student Association at my high school, but I was the only Muslim in my elementary school. I was one of maybe 3 students of color at my elementary school. I go to middle school, I brought in my worldview a little bit. I'm one of maybe 10 Muslims there. A lot more students of color. It was a little bit more diverse, but I still felt like there was loneliness there. I have such a vivid memory. 6th grade, I put my pencil down in math class because I didn't want to do math. And I just look around, I'm like, wow, there isn't a lot of people like me. And when you have that realization, it's incredibly lonely. I go to high school, and thankfully my high school is very large, and there is such a large population of Muslim students. There's a lot of students of color. It's predominantly students of color at my high school. And I finally saw my community. But then I still had the same issues that I had when I was in elementary school, of this sort of lack of support for being Muslim. And when I was talking with multiple friends of mine, they were just sharing their complaints, as friends do, about just, of trying to relate to teachers and tell them, like, hey, I'm fasting this month because it's Ramadan, and them not really understanding what that even means. There's a joke about, like, not even water? Yes, not even water for Muslims. There is such a lack of understanding between faculty and students, and really when faculty is there meant to support students, how do you do that when you don't really know where to go? And it's really important to do that. So in sophomore year, my friend came up to me and she was like, you know what? Let's just make a Muslim Student Association. And I loved the idea right away because that was a way to make meaningful change. We could both support Muslim students at my high school, but then also talk to faculty, which we did numerous times, and we made ourselves very open to faculty, regardless of the questions that they had. If they came very genuinely, which all of them did, we were there to answer them and kind of meet in the middle. And since then, we've heard such positive feedback, both from students and faculty. Students finally being able to feel seen. They don't have to keep explaining themselves to 50 people about the same thing. Faculty are actually aware, and they're allowed to kind of relate a little more to their students, talk to them, have that connection, that human connection, which is so important, especially at the age that we are at right now. And since then, in my work in the Muslim Student Association, we've done numerous things like holding potlucks and celebrations, opening it up to, Muslims and non-Muslims alike, and having these similar panels, but with faculty instead. So yeah.
I can't help but I can't help but plug a book, just given what you said. The book's entitled How to Know a Person, The Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen. So it's too bad it's already published because you can't get this story into it. But, so in each of these cases, I'm just curious to know, and Xavier, I'm going to start with you, whether did you have a sense when you first joined that organization that gave you those skills? How that organization existed, how it was financed. Is that something you even thought about? And now that you run it, you definitely know.
Yeah, yep. So a couple of things. So I'm the director of a youth build program in Mile High Youth Corps in Denver, Colorado. So this is my home state. Hopefully you all are enjoying your time here. I am from the city though, so it is still on my bucket list to come out here and go skiing. So I have not done that yet. So the youth build program is a national program and now global. So there's 220 programs throughout the U.S. and there is a youth build program in 13 other countries. So specifically, that program is the same program that I graduated from. But essentially what that program is it's a service program. And how that program was founded was by a woman named Dorothy Stoneman in 1978 in East Harlem. And really what she's seen was, in East Harlem, what she's seen is there was a need. So it was the first time that she came from a socioeconomic high background. So it was the first time that she's seen what we might consider what I call the hood or poverty. So one of the things that she's seen a lot of abandoned homes, and she's seen young people on the streets not really given opportunities, and the graduation rates not being where they needed to be. The first thing that she wanted to do, though, the first thing that she did is not like what most people do. Most people want to go in there and help and whatever. The first thing that she did, which I think was the smartest thing that she ever did, was she went and gathered those young people together. And she asked them, if given the resources, what would you do with your community? And that's really where the idea of Youth Build came from. So the young people during that time said, hey, what we would do is all the young people who are not having jobs right now, we will rehabilitate these houses and give them to the homeless, while we're also creating opportunities for us to learn construction and a trade, to move on and have affluent lives and things like that. So the Youth Build program was birthed out of young people saying there's a need in the community and how do we address it. So a nonprofit that I just created and just co-founded is called A Gang of Books. So growing up, there wasn't a lot of books in our homes. And really, the idea of the Gang of Books is to really create libraries and opportunities for literacy for communities struggling with gang affiliation or book deserts or other underserved communities. A lot of the people, so my co-founder, my brother, I'll give a shout out to him right now. He's currently incarcerated right now, but he also didn't take that. He took that as an opportunity to be like, hey, how do I give back? So one of the things that a lot of him and a lot of the folks that he's locked up with, they ran a survey and they said the same thing that Dorothy Stoneman kind of did. Hey, what was it that you were missing in it? And a lot of times folks said they didn't have access to some of the answers that they now find in books. So literacy was a big key around that, and that's really something that we're trying to generate around giving back. So it's really the idea that rather than a savior mentality of like, hey, I think giving and service is like interdependent. Sometimes you have folks who want to give money, and that's great. And then you also have folks who want to serve. And I think there's a unique perspective in terms of serving correctly, and there's no right or wrong answer, but you also want to be responsive to the community you're trying to serve. So I think the big key is really just seeing what is the need of that community, and the best way to find out about that is to ask the community and help them up and help empower them to create those opportunities. That's what democracy is all about. Rather than, it's the saying that you teach a person to fish, then they can feed themselves for a lifetime.
So actually, some of the research that's been supported by the Generosity Commission has shown that those who volunteer are the most likely to then give, and those who give are the most likely to volunteer, and that pro-social behavior is what they call it, tends to cluster. So folks that have volunteered for the first time are the most likely to register to vote for the first time. The same is true of those who've served on a jury. So once you've had that experience with civic engagement, when you know you can make a difference, then it's all open up to you. So, David, did you want to ask anything? Because you looked like you were mesmerized by everything Xavier said.
I was mesmerized, but I guess I would like to ask a question. And that's about something you said about the abundance mentality, that you're not looking at community service from a deficit mentality. And maybe this is for any of you guys. One of the things I've learned doing the reporting and the work involved with Weave is that the neighborhood knows what it needs. That you don't really need to tell the neighborhood what it needs. They know what it needs, sometimes lack resources. But I've also learned the neighborhood is the unit of change. That you don't want to just pluck one person out of a school and then think you've done a good job. You want, as a friend of mine says, you can't only clean the part of the swimming pool you're swimming in. And so I don't know if it's your high school or your neighborhood or your organization, whether you guys feel like, yeah, we have enough, we know what to do, or do you feel, well, we really need some technical expertise here? How do you approach that sense of we are enough?
And I would add to that, Kamal, is when there isn't quite the neighborhood, when you're the only person like you. So I would tack that on.
Yeah, well, specifically to answer David's question, kind of, I think that just like having almost some people with you, like, I'm not even sure how to phrase this at this point, but yeah, like, when I did broaden up my world and I saw other people that were just like me, it was that neighborhood again. And I think the most important part of when you notice that problem in your community, in your neighborhood, and you want to act change on it, I think it's just building that team with you, making sure that everyone has their own strengths to kind of bring to the table, and having people that can keep your projects or your ideas alive even after maybe you graduate high school or maybe you retire from the organization. Having just a diverse ensemble of people with you not only helps you tackle your own problem that you're focused on, but it broadens your own view to see things differently in ways that you didn't before. And I think that's really important when we're talking about tackling issues in today's world.
Yeah, I can add. Well, to echo your point, in youth perspective, youth know what they most need and what these solutions are. It's the need to amplify youth voices and to create these spaces for them to act on whatever is concerning their community. I think that's what there's a lack of and what there really needs to be spread wide, because yeah, everyone can identify an issue concerning your community, youth specifically, in our high school community, whether it is in our actual community in which we live in. We know what it is that concerns us for the most part. It is having those spaces and where we can work on reforming policies in our school district, or in general working together with administration or people in our community to actually create real change together. That is when you create like a real successful change in your community.
Good job. Yeah, to add, I think I just want to name that even so the programs that I'm a part of, so the Youth Build program in my Youth Corps is paid service opportunities. When you ask yourself who can serve or who can volunteer, I know this stuff is happening naturally, but when we think about who's invested in that, it's usually not those people who's in which communities we're trying to transform. So that's the historically marginalized communities. So if we want those folks to be involved and we ask them, I think it's given the resources for them to help empower their community and really transform it in specific ways. So what are some of those resources? I mean, you know, obviously it's the paid, but then there's opportunities for them to advance and to be able to be in spaces and to be at the table when so many doors have been closed to them, to be able to have those opportunities to serve. For me, it was the deficit base. So I got up, you know, growing up just hearing, hey, your neighborhood is bad, it needs this, they need to correct that I internalized those. So I think we need to be intentional and avoid narratives because some of those narratives stick. So, hey, you come from a bad neighborhood, or no, you are worth it and we see you, and you can become much more. And I think just those little subtleties of helping young people see themselves, or people from the community see themselves, naturally is the circle of life for them to contribute to their communities, more so than it is saying your community is this or it needs that. But changing those narratives, those subtleties in the narratives and labels that we carry.
Thank you so much. I think what I want to do is also invite you all in. We called this a focus group in part because what we knew, and it's one of the things the Generosity Commission is doing, is going around the country and speaking to the everyday givers and volunteers themselves. You can learn so much from research, but there is what research tells you are what are the unanswered but answerable questions, and that will come from the volunteers and givers themselves. So we'd love to have anybody raise their hand and talk about their moment, or ask questions of the panelists, and I'll tell you about mine too. Yes, we need a microphone.
Great. Hi, thank you so much. It is so exciting to hear from you all, especially those of you in high school. My name is Jonavi. I take the She Series, and I'm the president and founder of New Voters, which is a youth-led 501c3 that has registered 80,000 high school students to vote. So I'm and I started New Voters when I was a junior in high school. I graduated from college last year. And in terms of my moment, I was 16 when the 2016 election happened. I'm sure, like, for you guys, that was also a moment, and it was, seeing every decision that impacted me and my generation more than any other generation and having no say, and that was incredibly motivating. But I wanted to ask a question to you all, which is, I heard you say, like, if you want to do something in high school and you continue doing it, like, what support you need. And I'll say, like, the support that I've gotten from mentors, especially on, like, governance and, like, running, like, how to file taxes and hiring people and things like this is wrapping up my first year post-grad of doing this full time. And I just want to ask you two, like, you do such incredible things in high school. I pray that you continue doing it. What do you need to do that? And how can, I work with high school students every day, and I want to give them what they need to continue doing it, and I would just love to hear that from you.
Thank you.
For me, I think it's just genuine support and belief in your students. Something that I was thinking about earlier when she asked me, like, what if you even don't have a community? Well, our advisor for the Muslim Student Association is not even Muslim. She is a wonderful Christian lady, and she is just so supportive of people being who they are, being themselves. And I think when we talk about sort of empowering youth to take on these roles, it comes from that place of, even maybe I'm different than you, but I completely support you in what you're doing. Or, talking with, because she does so much work behind the scenes, I love her. So she helps us out in multiple ways than we could even think is imaginable. I think that starts there.
Yeah, to Kamar's point, it's truly creating spaces, whether it's Kamar space or a space for Latinos and just a community in which you can actually grow from, throw in ideas and actually receive this space, whether it's in your school community. In addition, I bring up amplifying student voices. There's spaces that don't have a student spot yet. It's allowing students to, take their first steps into these spaces that will actually allow us the opportunity to feel empowered, to feel this sense of, I can do this, and I can actually take on this role, in whatever role, and actually, contribute to your community. It all ties back. So it's truly creating, to Kamar's point, creating spaces in which you feel comfortable sharing perspectives, sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, and growing together. And it's truly empowering them to take on positions in leadership, politics as well.
More questions? Let me just mention something to give a sense of the scope of when we think about everyday giving. We're thinking about folks who join the PTA and that are supporting small organizations. Just to give you a sense of how much impact you can have with a small grant, I wrote over here with the treasurer of NRDC. $50 million a year comes into NRDC, which fights climate change, from small gifts. So in fact, there's enormous power. Set aside some of our concerns about the connection to democracy and to a resilient society. Even think about the direct impact of the particular issue that matters to you. You do not need to have a foundation or a donor-advised funds and gazillions of dollars. Way back there.
Thank you. My name is Jose. I am a DACA recipient, and I am a doctoral student at the University of Denver in education leadership for equity, justice, and diversity is what the program's called. So with DACA, I was able to graduate college, of course. I got a master's. Now I'm in the doctoral program. In the last 9 years, I was a probation officer in Denver. So I worked with youth. And I'm familiar with the Mile High Youth Corps. And I guess my question is, how do we make these types of support accessible to youth of color who are in the system? A lot of the youth that I work with were basically pushed away in school, right? IEPs weren't addressed. There wasn't really no real support. They'd call me saying, hey, look, so-and-so is acting up. Can you just deal with it, right? So a lot of the youth that I work with, graduation rates were low. So right now I'm the deputy court administrator for the city of Boulder. So I kind of shifted into an administration role. However, my overall goal is to work with the systems, which is the educational system and the criminal justice system, and work to find a way to support these youth who, frankly, they need the support, right? They do come from marginalized communities. They do have one-parent household, et cetera, right? Undocumented, documented, whatever. So how do we make them accessible for them? Because I feel like that is something that's not really spoken about, at least from my view, and from the last years that I've been PO.
Xavier, the difference between your brothers, what you've learned from your brother's experience.
Yep. So specific to Mile High Youth Corps, we don't have a lot of time to unpack everything you said there. I will say for Mile High Youth Corps, we are a partner, and that's thankful to the Aspen Institute. We are a partner with the Opportunity Youth Initiative, where there's organizations collectively trying to answer some of those questions that you have. Juvenile justice involved, my man Steve Patrick in the audience, right? So there are folks trying to answer those questions. I think what's hard as a director of a nonprofit and program is the cycles of funding. So we traditionally rely on government funding, which isn't always adequate, and thinking through that. So I do think this is a shameless plug to be like, we need more givers that aren't from governmental. So like really, so we can really run the program with fidelity and be able to solve some of those different problems. But let's connect afterwards in terms of that for sure. But there's a lot to unpack there. And we target juvenile justice youth in particularly. And I think there is a whole shift in terms of the notion of young people who have made a mistake when they were younger and really just helping to identify themselves. So even at Mile High Youth Corps, we think it's successful when someone comes through our doors and they change the reality of who they can become, whether they earn that GED in time or not. So really opportunities to just help them see themselves.
So I'm eager to hear from anyone, whoever asks themselves, and I'm going to turn to you in 1 second, whoever would like to affect change in some way or another, but says to him or herself, the problem's too large, I can't make a difference. I'm not Bill Gates, or I don't have many hours of free time. Love to hear from those who face a barrier and have a sense from the rest of you why you overcame your barriers. What's the difference, Xavier, between you and your brother? How is it that you had agency to move forward in the way you did and he did not? Anyway, I will start with the lady in the turquoise blouse. That's you, who's looking for a mic. Didn't you raise your hand?
Not for this particular question.
Oh, no, for anything you want to say. It's all yours.
The mic's right next.
Oh, thank you so much. Hi, my name is Virginia Aceves. I'm here with the Bezos Scholar Program. Very lucky to be here with some fantastic people who also happen to be up there on the stage. And what I would like to ask, and I would hope all of you would want to answer this, what is something small that you would like each of us here in this room hearing you, something that we could do within the next 6 months that you think would affect a powerful change in our community? Something actionable, ideally.
May I?
Yes.
I think the easiest and fastest way to really be involved in your community and kind of make change, at least within that 6 months, is just be an open ear. I cannot tell you how many students at my school will be complaining about the lack of support that they are experiencing for whatever reason. Maybe it's their sexuality, their race, their religion, whatnot. But just knowing that there is someone there that can at least hear them, if not solve their problems, just be an open ear, be that sort of person to lean on, makes all of the difference, truly.
Yeah, Virginia, great question. I think there's so many ways that you can actually take this question. I guess on an emotional level, it's filling all the spaces that you're in with youth in particular, or people that don't look exactly like you with radical love. I brought up this term to every Bezos scholar before, but radical love is being able to understand and grant a space for students and just people in general and where they feel heard. And I think that's something that isn't granted enough and something that we need to start filling our spaces with, so radical love. But in addition, just simply, even in the classroom as an educator, allowing students the opportunity to share their concerns and just amplifying voices everywhere is just such a small but effective way to actually get perspectives heard and allow students to really feel empowered in themselves, in their bodies, and in their communities.
So I'm sorry. So I'm going to call on you. Yes. So we just need a mic up front.
Okay, so thank you so much. My name is Karim. I'm from Tunisia, and I'm also one of the Bezos scholars, and those two are my friends. So just to share some of my story and also answer your question, I feel like I used to be one of those people that really believed that this problem is way too big for me. I wouldn't possibly be able to handle it myself and all of that. But I came across this quote that says, "Nothing changes if nothing changes." And I feel like that really hit home. I was like, let me just do something about it, And for me, my story revolves around the education system back home in Tunisia. And it was an accumulation of these events. Every year, students are unsatisfied with the education system. Every year, students express their anger and all of this. And I was one of those people. And I knew that this can't keep going on for the next generations. Something had to change. And I just, with one simple video, it had a huge ripple effect. Because I'm a content creator, I posted this one video talking about it, basically pointing out what's wrong with the education system. And I came up with this hashtag, which is basically in Arabic, but to translate it, it's change the system. It's that simple. And then I called my friends at my high school to do a protest the next day at my high school and not study for 2 hours, just to show that we actually care about this and we want to rebel in a way. And then somehow the television showed up, and then they filmed the protest, and then other students from other high schools saw us, so they followed us, and they did it the next day. And then other students across the country did it, and then the hashtag is trending across the country. And it started with just one video, and now we actually made some changes to the education system, thanks to that one video. So I guess just to speak on that, nothing changes if nothing changes. No matter how small you think your action would be, you never know. It might have this huge ripple effect, this huge domino effect. So just go for it, I guess. Yeah, do your thing,
So David, I'm going to turn to you because here's about the importance of telling the story, because here's a case where a video had this ripple effect.
Yeah, when that question, what practically can do, I have a buddy in Chicago named Nick Epley, and he's a psychologist, and he was commuting to work one day, and because he's a psychologist, he knows the things we want most and enjoy most is social connection with other human beings. And he's on the commuter train, and he looks across, and everyone's on their screen. No one's talking. So for the next several weeks, he pays everybody on his commuter line to have a conversation with neighbors. And then he interviews them afterwards, and they say, "Did you like your commute?" And everybody, introverts and extroverts, said, "This was the best commute I've had in months." And his finding is that we underestimate how much we'll want to talk to other people. We underestimate how quickly people want to go deep. And he demonstrated that. I was doing a panel with him in Chicago, and there were 800 people in the room. And he said, "We're going to break our conversation, and now we want you to pair up with a stranger and tell them about the last time you cried." And this groan goes up in the audience. "Oh, I don't want to do this." And he says, "I bet you don't want to do this. How many don't want to do it?" 80% raise their hand. And he says, "Go." Find a stranger. And we, after 20 minutes, we could not get them to pay back attention to us. And he then asked them, how many of you enjoyed that experience? And 80% of the hands went up. And so when I think we can talk about the organizing the organization and the structure and the governance and all that, but as I got deeper into this world, a lot of it comes down to how you build a relationship, how you operate a technology of convening, some way you're going to get people together, and then how you just make them feel seen. Yep. And so one of the things that I was motivated to write my last book, because in all these organizations, I just thought we're not doing a good enough job of how do you host a meeting so everybody feels included? How do you break up with somebody without crushing their heart? How do you ask for and offer forgiveness? How do you critique somebody? Because sometimes all your work, you have to critique sometime. How do you talk to somebody in authority? These are just basic skills. And I think it's those spreading of those skills that's like the concrete thing that can have big ripple effects. And the final thing I'll say is that I met a friend, I think in Washington, and she said, I practice aggressive friendship. I'm the person in the neighborhood who invites people over. And she doesn't have any organization. She just invites people over. And she has a picnic table, so people come over. That's her technology of convening. So I've learned to really focus on the minute details of social action, which is really the social skills of the basic relationship.
That is a perfect way to end, except we have one more. This is just a reminder that, in fact, the solution to many of the problems I began with, the solution to social isolation, the solution to loss of trust, is in fact engagement. So what people are dropping off over, it gets solved by engaging. Go ahead.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say how impressive all of you are and how excited I am by all that you're doing, and I congratulate you for that. And Hannah, you said that radical love is a small thing, and I just want to really disagree with you intensely, that radical love is the biggest and most important thing, and it's the thing that's going to make the difference for all of us. So thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Just to clarify, I meant it as one of the smallest things that a human should do for another is create a space where radical love is fostered. So that's what I meant by small. In no way is radical love small. But yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.